All right. First rule of this channel, we not talk about the channel. Second rule of this channel, this is not legal advice. So this is going to be after waivers for week 15 fantasy football. And that means if you're probably listening to this channel right now, you either made your playoffs or you really, really like fantasy football. Anyway, some of the stuff that we're going to be talking about real fast, and I'll just click over before I talk about some of the news and notes. Shakiro Sanders, I may not have been actually able to predict that he finished as quarterback one because Josh Allen did Josh Allen things, but he did finish as quarterback two this week. I will talk a little bit about him later on. I did see that people talking about like how bad the Tennessee defense is. Then we can talk about like could we have predicted this? Maybe on that one. Tyler Show, I don't think no, because I just don't think you're going to be able to predict those two rushing touchdowns that he was able to get against Tampa Bay. Blake Corum, you probably couldn't have bet on 25.6, and I'll just bring up this one, whatever he finished at when it was running back 3 on the week. You couldn't have predicted running back 3. I think you could have predicted like close to running back 3, like a top 10 running back. I do think that you could have gotten the spike week. Sanders, maybe you could talk about getting the spike week. Show, no. Blake Corum, yeah, you could have had this in your lineup. Like I almost did. We went Adonai Mitchell, that killed us, but I was close to rolling Blake Corum just to get the 40-degree day, and then that's how it happens in fantasy football. When you go for the 40-degree day, you get the spike week. Tony Pollard, this is one of those like fantasy football is a cruel mistress on this one, where it's like, hey, you just rolling that guy because of maybe, I guess. I don't think if you had him, maybe you were in that situation where he's like that desperation RB2 or something like that, or that flex you got him. I don't know. Michael Wilson, going back like 2 or 3 years with the channel at this point, like he's good at football. The Arizona Cardinals as an organization are not. So like, yeah, we can trust the process on this one where it's like, hey, he finally gets the opportunity and he's just going to be the guy. And it just depends on like if you're going to be lucky enough to have picked him up and rolled him, and then you hold on to him, and then everything works out on that one. Ryan Flanoy, maybe we could talk about that one. And this is more like, hey, who's the wide receiver 3 for the Cowboys going into a shootout? And then you're in deep enough, dark enough leagues that you're essentially chasing the number 4 option in the Cowboys passing game, and then you wouldn't have been able to predict that CeeDee Lamb goes down, and then Pickens does Pickens things, but what you could have predicted is like, hey, I want a piece of this game, and then that's how you would have got the spike week on that one. Harold Fannin, like probably just that like 40-degree day with a chance of a spike, and you got it. So I don't think that one's like really surprising at all. We did talk about Gesicki before, and these matchups that are going to be going on down the line, and like, just hey, could you have predicted that one? Absolutely, that one's easy. And then Josh Oliver, absolutely not. Blocking tight end, one of the best blocking tight ends in real football, and then he just happens to get like 2 targets and they're both touchdowns. Like that's how it goes. So like some of these we could talk about being able to predict and being cute and not being cute, and then like the right process. And remember, if I can live with the process when it's wrong because it was the right process, the logic behind it, I can live with that. Where it's like, absolutely not being able to go, hey, I'm gonna go roll Josh Oliver. I did in my high school league where like I rolled Adonai Mitchell and I rolled Darren Waller. The 2 other options would have been Blake Corum and Harold Fannin, and there you go. That's why I didn't get the bye week, but that's the process behind it. I went for the upside. Me and my co-manager decided to play upside instead of like the 40-degree day. Sometimes those 40-degree days, like they're a lot like better than we can remember. All right, let's see some of the other stuff that I was going to talk about with your playoff rosters. Your playoff rosters pretty much entirely different than your seasonal rosters. There's a lot of blocking going on. I like to look at like the road to how I'm going to get there. Is one of my opponents going to be rolling that like weekly defense? Do I think he's going to be cute enough to try and like take that weekly defense and bench them for a matchup? Some of those defensive matchups, like I will be rolling. I will be rolling some, or I shouldn't say rolling. I will be holding on to like 2 or 3 defenses sometimes, of like if that's what's available on my wire, because I just don't want them in someone else's lineup. If I can predict some of those that are going to be out there, if there's some like really good matchups, like if it's one of those things where I'm like, I don't care if that guy rolls that guy against me and I can live with that, versus like I don't want that guy in my lineup. All the cuffs should be like rostered at this point. Like I would like my league winners. I don't want those league winners on someone else's roster. That's just how I would look at that. Kind of get an idea of like who's next man up for me. If I really want a guy, like if I don't really worry about that guy being rolled against me, like shouldn't be on my roster. Those league winning type upside guys. If those guys exist, I would rather them be on my bench, even if I'm not going to roll them, because I don't want someone like getting cute and trying to roll that upside against me. Again, like a lot of fantasy football at this point with your playoffs are going to be like the next week's defense that you're going to be picking up out there. Lots of blocks, if a guy is kind of streaming or like his flex or some of his positions, I will look ahead and see like like your Gesicki's going back to here. I will look at him and go, I don't want Gesicki rolled against me because there's always that chance of a spike, even though like it's snap share and like how many guys are going to be down the line. These are really good matchups with Baltimore and Miami and like Arizona down the line. If I look at the road to how I'm going to get to my chip, even if I have like Ty Warren or something like that as my tight end, if one or more of my opponents are going to potentially end up picking up a streaming tight end, and they're savvy enough to go like, hey, these are really good matchups, maybe I could get a spike. And remember, tight ends can't break my heart. Like, yeah, I will be picking these guys up and just stashing them because your bench spots really don't matter. You get to your chip and you want to like just like release all your bench into the wild because your opponent ain't gonna roll them and you ain't gonna roll them. Like it doesn't matter when it gets down to some of that stuff. So picking up those guys that are very volatile and may end up disproportionately affecting the outcome of your league. Those are the guys that are going to end up having priority. And then like knowing like if you're going to roll them and if someone else is going to roll them and stuff like that. Are you ever going to use a guy? I think I'm just looking at my notes. Are you going to ever use a guy? Do you want them rolled against you? Like, if you're the type of guy that's gotten into your playoffs and you've just been, have that juggernaut team and, how you're going to build the bottom of your bench at that point versus if you're one of those guys that have gotten into your playoffs because you've been juggling your lineup because you've been getting right with all those guys out there, like kind of know the difference. Are you going to continue to be juggling? Who are the guys you're going to be streaming in a couple weeks? Like those are things as I continue to ramble on. All right. Defenses for week 16 that we're going to be looking at right now. Bills and Browns, like, hey, still would be rolling the Bills against the Browns, but, hey, after Shakur did, quarterback 2, would maybe change my mind a little bit, but not a lot. Like Kansas City going up against the Titans, if they're available again, like they shouldn't be available, but if they are, Jets and Saints right now, we're currently looking at rolling the Saints against the Jets because of the quarterback situation for the Jets. So like if that's available and anybody rolling or the Saints offense may no longer be the defense to be or offense to be going after at this point. Giants and Vikes, still expecting that you're going to get JJ McCarthy to turn into a pumpkin. So like, that's, I think that's a pretty good logic to be going after. Texans and Raiders, that's probably the premier one, I think, right now, not named the 49ers. So if magically set and forget defense in the Texans are available, may have the best matchup against the Raiders in week 16 if you're planning that far ahead. And again, if you're having to play the bye week, week 15 because you didn't get your bye, that would be like more chasing the dragon stuff, like who's available, like we talked about that last week. Anyway, and then finally, right now, because of the quarterback situation for the Colts, the 49ers jump up and they would be like a heavy stream going up against the Colts in week 16 if they're available. And then moving on to week 17, if you have the ability to start planning ahead. So even if you are have to play week 15, yeah, because it's not real football. It's fantasy football. You can be planning ahead to make it to your chip, even if there's maybe not the best chance you're going to win week 15. You can plan ahead that way with your defenses, and obviously if you got your week 16 bye, you should be planning to win your week 16, so you can get into week 17 at this point. And then defenses, Lions and the Vikes, again expecting you might be able to go up against JJ McCarthy on that one. And then Steelers and Browns, again, attacking Shakur, may not be the best ones that I would like to go after. Saints and Titans, Saints have just jumped up to the point where, like, yeah, they're probably going to be like, they may end up factoring into chips, across the league. The Saints are at this point. Jags and Colts, again, going after the quarterback situation for the Colts, and we'll talk more about that. But like right now, if the Jags are available, Pats and Jets, again, because of the quarterback situation for the Jets, and Giants and Raiders because the Raiders are really bad. But the premier one right now, I would probably be guessing towards the Lions, I guess, in week 17, Saints, Saints or Lions, maybe the Pats if they're available, something like that. All right, let's get into the weekly or player by player like we used to do. Or let's see, I'm rolling down here. Their 49ers had a bye. Week 16 does not look as good as it did before, and that's going to be because week 16 did look like it was going to be a shootout, and now I would say like we can predict it towards being an uglier type script game with the Colts that are going to be going on down the line, and then you are potentially going to get some type of shootout in week 17. So again, like if you want to be chasing, your Slick Ricks, if he's available. The other thing is like roster your cuff, and hopefully I will talk about some of the cuffs that are out there in fantasy football around, like Brian Robinson coming out of your bye. It doesn't matter if you have CMC or not. Like these are the guys who are going to disproportionately affect your league, and this is like proactive. So if you don't get them chasing the dragon because you don't have the waiver wire claim, or you don't have the fab because you've been dumping all your fab going after like the upside guys during the season, these are the sneaky moves that like if they're swimming around your waiver wire after waiver wire is clear, these are the guys that you definitely want to be picking up at this point if you made it in your playoffs, because you probably have enough league winning type guys to have gotten you there in the first place at this point. So like these are the ones that like the extra effort to be putting out to not have to be dropping fab that I don't have when everybody else is like, oh, this is the cuff that you should be able to go again, because like we couldn't predict the injuries that are going to be going out there right now, because I don't like giving up like free league winners if I don't have to. All right. No news on Brandon Ayuk that are going to be out there. A little bit of, this is more dynasty stuff, stuff that I like to track because I do like Javon Baker coming out of college. He did go to the Patriots. He's a 4th round draft pick. He got cut, went and signed on with the Eagles. Now he's with the 49ers. This is just more stuff that tells me that like Ayuk is probably done. I don't know. He may be a better fit than Juwan Jennings down the line for the offense. But like Slick Rick is going to be Slick Rick. I think he's going to be pretty good in that like technician man beater type role that like Ayuk would have done. And then Javon Baker might be a pretty good X next to that, like that out there. It's pretty interesting out there. It's probably more dynasty league stuff than anything else. Bears in this one. Let's move down to here. So the Bears usage flopped a little bit, which this is just telling you like we don't really, they don't care about your fantasy lineup. We're not going to be able to predict this stuff. So DeAndre Swift 57% snaps. I have written down here 5 total red zone went to him and 2 went to Monongahela. So like overall snap share was relatively consistent between the two, but the red zone usage just flopped. So which means that like they're not tracking that stuff the same way that we would be on our end on this one. Wide receiver stuff for the Bears. Let's go right here. So Rome, I guess the Twitters are speculating that this is a broken foot for Rome, may be done for the year, for the fantasy or from a fantasy perspective because of the broken foot. Like that's the speculation that's going on out there right now. And I'll go to like DJ Moore, and they're like, oh, DJ Moore may be the beneficiary of Rome. I don't think so. So what the Twitters were talking about is old of mine, Zacchaeus. He went to 79% snaps. He was the guy who stepped in for Rome in this one. And then Luther Burden did get the uptick to 71% snaps, but like he may be more of the slot guy, and Zacchaeus may end up being like the actual like X replacement for Rome in the offense. That may occur down the line, but outside of trying to speculate on a potential week where you're going to be rolling out like your deeper toys, week 17 against the 49ers, going over your tight end usage overall, let's see. Cole Kmet, 1 red zone opportunity. Loveland had 1 red zone opportunity. Overall snap share was relatively consistent. Cole Kmet, 76% snaps, and Loveland at 59% snaps. So like in your deep enough, dark enough leagues, I would be speculating on your Colston Loveland week 17. And then when it comes to your wide receivers, if you're going to be tracking on this stuff, like there's a possibility that Luther Burden would be the guy that would interest me the most out of all these guys if Rome is going to be out for a significant amount of time. But I would probably still be leaning that like Loveland is going to end up being the league winner over Burden if that occurs, with all that stuff. So anyway, let's see. Moving on to the Bengals, and they lost in a fantasy shootout against the Bills. Chase Brown was at 67% snaps. Well, actually, I'll talk about Joe Burrow again. Says this again, like your league winners, this stretch of games. Like first of all, like Joe Burrow is a guy that we can kind of predict is going to throw more passing touchdowns. Does have a little nimbly bimbly to him. This is all the stuff he got dropped in your league. So like you're still tracking 15, 16, 17 is all potential shootout games where you're like rolling deeper toys, which means like, you can get your 40-degree quarterback day with a chance of a spike, or you can predict the spike anyway on top of that. So like with your Joe Burrow, when it comes to like your running back usage, relatively consistent, 67% snaps for Chase Brown. He did have 3 total red zone. I think it was 2 carries and 1 target. I think he tugged on the target. No, he tugged on the rushing touchdown. Anyway, Samaje Perine in his 37% snaps did have 2 red zone carries on top of that. So like relatively consistent. And the main thing would be like the chasing Chase Brown. You can guess that Samaje Perine may fall into the end zone as like that desperation RB2, which type about like your Blake Corums on stuff like that. Like being able to predict a guy's going to get red zone opportunity in and off good offense. Well, from a fantasy perspective, that's all we care about. And that's how we would get there with all that stuff. But Chase Brown, like he's going to be the big beneficiary of having the more monster spike weeks that you drafted with. So like hopefully you did hold on to him at this point. All right, T. Higgins, I guess another concussion, and at this point, like because they lost, it would not be surprising that he just gets shut down because I don't see him playing week 15. It gets dicier for him to play week 16, and because of like the multiple concussions at this point, like probably should just be shut down. But like, hey, I don't have any say so over that stuff. Let's see. I have to go to here and type in Burton and talk about like Jermaine Burton. So he was missing time with that ankle. He actually got suspended this game by the Bengals, and then they just waived him. So he's gone. If you're holding on to him in your fantasy or your dynasty leagues that are going to be out there at this point, like he's no longer a part of the Bengals. So like maybe he's trackable depending on where he lands or stuff like that. But like probably not a big thing for the foreseeable future. Yosivas was down to 65% snaps. Like it did not necessarily see a guy that I would really want to go after. Tinsley was at 15% snaps in the game. I outside of that, so that's why I would say like in general, probably the next guy up is going to be Gesicki at this point, and these are going to be games that are going to project as higher scoring. That's how I would see all that stuff. Let's see. Bills. I gotta erase James Cook in my notes. Running back usage remained consistent. Josh Allen, you get your like victory lap. You have like, another 4 total touchdowns when it comes to all that stuff. Wide receiver room gets like really weird, so I'll just get Brandon Cooks out of the way so I don't have to go look him up. Brandon Cooks was at 36% snaps. He had 0 opportunities. Gabe Davis was at 58% snaps. Shaver was at 56% snaps. Keon Coleman was at 28% snaps. Josh Palmer was out. And I bring all this stuff up so we could talk about the tight ends for the Bills at this point. And again, like that little bit of shootout. 34% snaps for Dalton Kincaid, 5 for 4 for 41, and a touchdown. And then sometimes like all the logic in the world doesn't matter because like the 2 weeks that Dawson Knox doesn't have Dalton Kincaid, he doesn't do anything from a fantasy perspective. And then the week that they come in, he does 55% snaps, 7 for 6 for 93. And then to just show how like little fantasy football matters at certain points, Jackson Haas, 53% snaps, 1 for 3, and a touchdown. So there you go on all that stuff, trying to guess where everything's going to go when it comes to the Bills and their passing game. Not named Dalton Kincaid, at this point, because he's a tight end, can't break my heart. So there you go. All right. Moving on to the Broncos and more of your league winners with like RJ Harvey in this one. 68% snaps, 6 red zone for him, 2 went to everybody else. So that's how you get like your 19-point week. And again, your scoring settings may be a little bit different than mine. Wide receivers are a little bit all over the place. And that's going to be because like this was basically a blowout of the Raiders. 65% snaps, Cortland Sutton. Pat Bryan was at 47% snaps, which would be concerning, except for the fact that, again, it was kind of a blowout. That's where you get like Marvin Mims doing 27. You get Troy Franklin all the way down to like 26 in this one. And I forget who the wide receiver who got the beneficiary. Like our boy Little Jordan Humphrey was back to 38% snaps because it was kind of a little bit of a blowout in this one. So there you go to get an idea behind that. Don't care about the Broncos tight ends. There you go. That's all I got to talk about with Broncos. All right, Browns. So I did watch again a little bit of Shakur, and again, I don't necessarily think he's bad at football. That's generally not the conversation that I would have. I don't know how much you could predict the rushing touchdown and the 3 passing touchdowns in a script where he throws like 42 pass attempts, and then there's some shenanigans because the Browns are not a good, well-coached team at this point. All that stuff going up against the Titans, that's how you get there. Maybe you can talk about like these next two games, Chicago and Buffalo having higher passing scripts, which you would want. I don't know how much you're going to be able to predict any more rushing. Yes, in your two quarterback leagues, I probably would be guessing Chicago, Buffalo as him being rollable. In your one quarterback leagues, like, yeah, man, if you want to do that, that's on you. Let's see. And then I did see that Dylan Gabriel did come in for like one snap or something like that in the game. But Shakur is going to be the starting quarterback for the rest of the season for the Browns. Running back usage will go to Jerome Ford. He gets IR with the shoulder. I imagine that the receiving work, again, is going to be eaten up by Dylan Sampson, but there's also the chance that it's going to be eaten up by Judkins. And I'll just bring back, we'll talk about Judkins right here because they did bring him in on the 2-point play at the end of the game because they're kind of dumb. What I was going to say on this one is knowing the difference, the check down monster work may go to Judkins versus the assigned receiving work, which is probably going to go to Sampson. And the screens are kind of weird from a fantasy football perspective because it depends on how much they're used in the screen game versus the decided receiving game, which can be like more predictable. And again, I imagine the Jerome Ford work may be absorbed by Judkins. I don't necessarily think it's going to actually up him. If anything, and this would be like your deeper, darker leagues with your Dylan Sampkins, 6 for 5 for 64, fumble lost in this one, but I can see that like slight uptick would be probably to him over the slight upkick to Judkins if you're into that type of thing. I don't know. And then you're trying to guess the weeks that the Browns are going to be functional. Again, if you got here outside of maybe riding the spike week for Judkins early, you're probably getting to the point where like probably shouldn't be rolled unless he's in like that RB2 type flex range because you picked him up. All right. Now, the other thing that I would talk about here, let's get this out of the way. Cedric Tillman, 64% snaps, and then Bond was down to 48% snaps. We're actually up, but he only had 2 targets. It doesn't really matter. So Jerry Jeudy, if you believe Jerry Jeudy, 5 for 3 for 76 and touchdown. If you believe, he would be in that like wide receiver 3 range that I would think about, like if you're in those like type of leagues where some of this is available and you want to chase a little bit of the cuteness of Chicago and Buffalo because of the spike weeks. Now, moving on to tight end, so Njoku only 9% snaps, 1 for 1 and a touchdown. He hurts his knee on the play, like who knows what's going on with all that stuff. Harold Fannin, 90% snaps, 11 for 8, 114 and a touchdown. Did write down his air yards, 74 air yards on 11 targets. So like that's, I would say, like pretty good for a tight end. It's not great. That doesn't mean he's being used vertically, but it's not all check down monster work if you want to be going after that. And then the Bears, and again, to repeat, the Bears and the Buffalo Bills are probably like pretty good weeks to kind of chase somewhat of the same outcome to occur again. All right. Buccaneers got upset by the Saints in this one. And I was kind of looking at the schedule for the Buccaneers. If you think you can guess, these are going to be like really difficult weeks to guess scripts because who knows, like Atlanta and the Panthers have been all over the place. Like the Dolphins have been kind of, maybe we could say like not a bad offense at this point, but being able to predict that you're going to get the actual like shootout at this point, I think is going to be a little bit more difficult to guess if you're wondering about stuff. Okay, Bucky Irving to start all this stuff at 49% snaps. Rachaad White was at 49% snaps. Sean Tucker was at 16% snaps. 2 red zone went to White. 2 red zone went to Sean Tucker. He tugged on one of his 2 red zone, and then Bucky Irving had 0 red zone. Now, does this necessarily mean that this is going to remain consistent? I don't know when it comes down to that. I can see it remaining consistent because if they have a role for everybody in the offense at this point, like that probably would downgrade Bucky Irving. And then you're trying to guess like usage. Probably, hopefully you didn't go out and spend on Bucky Irving to be your RB1. If you did, like you're probably just going to be rolling him there, like regardless. But like that kind of would bother me that you're going to have limited touchdown opportunities with Bucky Irving to finish off season. So again, if you're going to be guessing on those benches, something like that would tell me, maybe I would think about like getting cute on certain things. Mike Evans, again, limited on Tuesday, so he may be coming back, and then we could go to find Jalen McMillan, limited on Tuesday, so he may be coming back. Now, a lot of stuff to talk about. We'll talk about Sterling Shepard was down, or I said down, but he 57% snaps in this game, and then you're looking at like Tez Johnson, wherever he's at right there. He was down to 46% snaps. None of this is surprising at this point. And then Godwin, right there, it says fibula, full participant Tuesday, whatever. 69% snaps for him, 8 for 5 for 55. And I bring all of this up so we could talk a little bit about Ibuka, because I would definitely downgrade him. I just don't know if you're going to get any consistency. You may get a chance of a spike, especially when all the receivers are there. I imagine you're going to get like Mike Evans and McMillan coming back. They're probably not going to be full speed. They're going to eat a certain amount of the offense. Godwin's not going to be a full-time player. Ibuka probably would be the only full-time player right now when it comes to the wide receivers, when all the wide receivers are back. And then as they progress, if the Buccaneers end up being in the playoff hunt, because they may not be in the playoff hunt. It depends. Like they got to beat, I think right now, like Carolina. These two Carolina games are probably going to decide the NFC South at this point. And I bring all this up because now you're trying to predict like if there's a possibility of getting a Ibuka spike week with these defenses are going to be very difficult to guess the game flow. Maybe Miami and Evans, if he's healthy, he will end up playing on the field. He'll eat a certain amount of snaps. And then Godwin may never be a full-time player again this year. And then if Ibuka is the full-time player and Mike Evans makes his way back, and then Jalen McMillan will he'll end up being the number 4, but he'll take the overflow snaps of what's left over from these guys not playing like 90-something% snaps all this into account down the line. So again, I would probably downgrade Ibuka if you're in a good enough position and you have Ibuka at this point. Like I probably would not be worrying about him outside of a spike. And then a non-predictive spike at that one, because I don't think you're getting any consistency out of him. And I did see the Twitters on his 9 targets. Like one of those was a drop touchdown pass that was out there. So like all that stuff contributing to me not getting my bye week. All right, and then Cade Otton, and this is more like, hey, the stuff that I like to track. So Cade Otton missed on Tuesday with a knee. And this is going back to like why the wide receivers matter, because remember, vacated targets tend to go to tight ends first, but they're going to end up going to wide receivers because they got a whole bunch of wide receivers coming in. So if Cade Otton misses, I imagine that like Payne Durham is going to end up being like the number 1 tight end, which means I don't care about this. What would get like kind of interesting if buts and maybes would be Devin Culp. He's like the receiving tight end, but as you can see, he hasn't been used in that role at all. But because of the vacated opportunities, if Cade Otton misses, yeah, I don't see any type of way that I would be rolling your Devin Culp. But like, if it happens, it happens. That's how I would look at it when it comes down to him. If there's a possibility that he's going to end up taking over that receiving role, if buts and maybes with the wide receivers, all that stuff, probably don't care. All right, Cardinals. And we do have to talk about the Cardinals because they may end up being a little bit of league winnery. We talk about that going into your playoffs. So week 15, absolutely not. Probably like I would even get to the point where we could be a little bit fun about like benching your Michael Wilsons if Marvin Harrison ends up being out, because like Houston defense is really good. Week 17 gets really fun, and then week 16 could go like either way when it comes down to like the Bengals. So like that's how I would look at like Jacoby Brissett if he's available. Don't care about the running backs. If you're wondering, Bam Knight was at 47% snap, 53% snaps when it comes to Michael Carter. Again, I don't care about these guys that are out there. And then I did see, where's it at? Jalen Brooks was at 40% snaps in the game. He's over from the Cowboys. I imagine he might actually go up a little bit. Again, we're kind of tracking on Marvin Harrison, and I didn't see any stuff on Marvin Harrison right now about whether or not he's going to play at this point. So you got to be deep enough, dark enough leagues. And then Basilia, whatever, he was the guy at 79% snaps. That's how we get there when we talk about like Michael Wilson, doing like, probably got a whole bunch of people into their chips or cost a whole, or their playoffs, or cost a whole bunch of other people their chance to get into their chips. 79% snaps, 16 for 11, 142, and 2 touchdowns on this one. So like, yeah, probably at this point I would be rolling him, but like you want to be talking about getting cute with your predicted bench, that would be week 15 because of that Houston defense at this point. All right. Chargers, they were able to beat the Eagles. We'll move on to this. Running back usage. Well, actually, I want to talk about Justin Herbert real quick. So if he's available in your league and you're planning ahead, week 16 Cowboys, like we could talk about like that being a shootout if he's available again. And I could see that he has been dropped for certain reasons between like week 10 to week 14. And again, if you're planning ahead, week 16, there you go. Running back usage overall. So Amarian Hampton, he's back. He does 31% snaps in the game. Here's your butt. 5 red zone carries, 1 red zone target. He tugged on the target. So with Vidal in the game, 69% snaps, 14 for 44, 3 for 1, 460 in the game. He did have 1 red zone carry, 1 red zone target. So I would imagine maybe it's going to end up being more of a 50-50 split, but they do appear to prefer Hampton in the red zone. If you're wondering about that, and again, that would depend on if you're going to be getting a little cute with Vidal as that emergency RB2 versus like Hampton, and wondering about like what the value of these guys are going to be. And definitely like Vidal at this point should be just rostered because of the upside if he gets back into that full bell cow. All right. Tight end or wide receiver usage ended up remaining the same. I don't have a lot to talk about with them because this matchup against Philadelphia, and then you can look at like week 15, probably would be guessing these could be uglier script games. So I could see them going that direction, and that's like predictive bench land. You do you when it comes to like if you have a better guy to be putting into a guy that like you would feel bad about because they're good enough to be able to predict it on the bench. Tight end usage wise. So in my main money league, and I talk about this like with Gadsden, I am holding him for week 16, that Dallas game, expecting that to be like a barn burner. He goes down to 62% snaps, not surprising because of the game flow with the Eagles in this one. So that doesn't really bother me. And then you look at, where's he at? Disley was at 36% snaps in the game. So again, if they're running the football more, probably, we already knew this, Gadsden is not necessarily going to be the blocking tight end. So in a script, we can guess that he's going to be the receiving tight end. Hey, there we go. And that's how I would generally look at him. So I probably would only really want to be rolling him week 16, week 15, week 17. I'm probably not going to be rolling your Gadsden out there. And I'm going to be trying to catch that another spike week if he's available in that one. All right. Chiefs, and they lost to the Texans. And I did see a tweet talking about your Patrick Mahomes, that like, still a good quarterback, not a real football channel, don't care about any of that stuff. One of the things to talk about, like if we can predict certain things, like prime Travis Kelce and prime Tyreek Hill probably really help you being a good quarterback to like the next tier. I would just say, like, I did see that tweet today. Didn't think about that. All right, Isaiah Pacheco, 33% snaps in the game, and 59% snaps went to Kareem Hunt. He got all the red zone. There you go. And then Smith was at 8% snaps, and I don't have anything else to talk about with anybody else. The only other thing that I did see that they were talking about on your Twitters is when Tyquin Thornton was operating in that deep threat range earlier in the season, the offense did operate better. So I don't necessarily think anything's going to change. Snapshot does not say that anything's going to change, but that's what they were talking about with all that stuff. So I did think that was a little bit interesting. Did not consider that stuff. All right, Colts. Lots of stuff to talk about with the Colts. So league winner Danny Dimes done for the year with an Achilles. And before we get into what my thoughts are on Riley Leonard right there, 44-year-old Phillip Rivers, he's going to come out of retirement. He may end up playing in week 15. And I will say, like, there was arm strength problems with him when he did play for the Colts like 4 years ago. So I don't necessarily think that's going to change. That's going to like definitely hurt your toys. Riley Leonard, I did like him coming out of Notre Dame. In this one, 18 for 29, 145, and an interception, and then you have a rushing touchdown. The offense probably is going to be more dynamic with Riley Leonard because of the arm strength. I think that like Phillip Rivers will probably operate the offense better because Phillip Rivers is like one of the better cerebral quarterbacks who have ever played. And that's how I would generally look at these two guys. So like Seattle week 15, they're going to get mauled. Week 16, San Francisco, maybe the game's going to be competitive. Week 17, the game's going to be competitive. And then week 18 against the Texans, they're going to get mauled. Now, week 16 and week 17, it just becomes an issue of can they get enough functional quarterback play to potentially end up turning these into a script where you could maybe roll your Michael Pittmans or your Josh Downs or your Ty Warrens or your Jonathan Taylor. Because at this point, you would really have to think about like benching your Jonathan Taylors. The other thing that I would generally look at when it comes to the Colts down the line with these matchups is your deep threats, and we'll talk about like Alec Pierce right here. Just generally how he operates in the offense, like with Phillip Rivers, I'm probably not rolling Alec Pierce. Because if he's going to get those shot plays, those are probably not going to be there with Phillip Rivers. They may be there with Leonard. Now, your Michael Pittman's, he's probably going to be more of the possession guy. Like, I would maybe guess that with Phillip Rivers, he might be upgraded, might be downgraded with Riley. And then Josh Downs is going to be like in that. The snap share is going to be all over the place. Usage is going to be all over the place. That's how I would look at that. Probably the biggest beneficiary to all this is Tyler Warren, because he's a tight end. That's how I would kind of break all that stuff down. If you're at this point and you got there when it comes down to it. Now, again, with your Jonathan Taylors, like, if you're spicy enough to be benching him, week 15, I'd be benching him. And then week 16, week 17, I'd feel a little bit better about that. But again, like, part of that's going to come down to like who the actual starting quarterback is going to be for the Colts down the line. That's going to be interesting, because the other thing is with Riley Leonard with that PCL is even if he plays, they're going to come after him. That's how I would deal with that. So you're going to have like the rookie processing problem on top of the fact is like he's just going to be lame. It may be better just to take the loss with Phillip Rivers, and I bring all this up again when it comes to the Colts, because like at this point I don't think they're going to make the playoffs in real football. So yeah, it's going to be a tough one. And even if they do, like I think they go from like maybe early in the season looking like a Super Bowl team to like it doesn't matter if they make the playoffs. I'll just say. All right. Redskins. So this is another one, and I talked about this with where are they at? The Vikings defense, because they got blown out by the Vikings. The Vikings defense is set up to like live by the blitz, die by the blitz, like Vic Fangio's fire zone, whatever. In this case, what I will say is like it's always going to be a gamble rolling anything against the Vikings. You're just not going to be that defense that not going to know how they're going to work out. And then you have like JJ McCarthy on that. So Jaden Daniels gets knocked out with an elbow. Supposedly he could have come back in the game, but because they're getting blown out, that's what occurred on that one. So you have like they got mauled by the Vikings, and then the elbow on top of that when it comes down to it. Now, running back situation, relatively the same usage overall. We'll just go to your C-Rod. The only guy that I would probably be rolling, 42% snaps, 10 for 52. 2 red zone went to him, 1 went to Bill. There you go on that one. Wide receiver usage, I don't got anything to say about that because they got mauled. Generally, the direction that I would be looking at. And you got to be like really hard off to be trying to guess this one. So Zach Ertz gets knocked out for the year with an ACL. John Bates, he's probably the blocking tight end. You see the slight uptick, 62% snaps for him in the game. Again, they got blown out. And then they also have Colston Yankoff, who's kind of this hybrid player from UCLA. We have been tracking him a little bit on the channel. He jumps to 23% snaps on top of all this stuff. And if you're going to be guessing on all this because of the quagmire that are the Redskins at this point, now you could talk about like Ben Sinnott in this one, like 25% snaps. Like, who's the guy that I want? Probably none of them. But like, if you're in those ugly enough leagues that you have to, I may guess that you're going to get Sinnott, but I could also see that like Yankoff is going to end up being like that 42% snap guy that like gets the targets when he's on the field. If you're wondering about that. All right. Cowboys. So this was another fantasy friendly shootout that they got into with the Lions, and they lost. Running back usage remained consistent, and then CeeDee Lamb gets knocked out with a concussion. Because it was a Thursday night game, maybe you're going to get him back for week 15. George Pickens, I did watch some of the tape doing George Pickens things. 9 for 5 for 37 in this one. The main one is going to be, and it says, that's Jalen Tolbert. Flournoy right there, 65% snaps, 13 for 9 for 115, and a touchdown. Already talked about the fact that, like, yes, in your deep enough leagues, like, you could have guessed that you're going to get some type of fantasy relevant week out of him, and he did not disappoint on that one. So, like, probably slight upgrade if, what's his face, CeeDee Lamb misses. But again, I bring this up with the Minnesota defense right there. Who knows what direction that game flow is going to go in, especially with like JJ McCarthy. So that's how I would view all of that stuff. Dolphins, we'll go to them. So first, you're going to look at, where is he at? A-Chain right there. So he gets, Devin A-Chain gets knocked out with a rib in this one. And I did go look it up. So like Jalen Wright would be my guess is the guy that if A-Chain misses with that rib. 52% snaps, 24 for 107, a touchdown, 3 targets in this one. He did get the first look in the backfield. He scored the first touchdown. Ollie Gordon's touchdown came late in the game. He was only at 25% snaps, 5 for 17, and a touchdown. This kind of was a blowout, but like Jalen Wright was already involved earlier in the game. I did go check the game log. That's how I would guess on that one. But again, I would imagine that you may end up getting like more of a 50-50 split if A-Chain does miss. And then it just becomes an issue of red zone work if the offense is going to be good enough to be able to predict red zone work. And again, like Jalen Wright did score from the red zone. So like probably would lean him. I also would be rolling Ollie Gordon in your deep enough leagues as that like desperation RB2, something like that. If you're wondering, because I don't know if you're necessarily going to be able to guess usage, but we right now would be tracking that A-Chain is going to be missing. Now, tight end wise, it will go to Darren Waller. So he's back again, 37% snaps, 3 for 1 for 13. He did have a carry also, but this is bothering me a little bit more with Greg Dolch, and he's another receiving tight end, more of like a big slot. 54% snaps, 3 for 3 for 41. So he got the work that we would expect that Waller would get, and if that remains consistent, he may end up being the tight end that I would want more out of Darren Waller at this point. I didn't see any red zone with these guys, and again, Week 16 definitely going to be rolling toys in this game against the Bengals. Week 17, we'll talk about that. Let down line, and Dolce did have a red zone opportunity on top of that. All right, Eagles. Not a lot to say about the Eagles and their loss to the Chargers. Right, Mir. Let's see. Theoretically, matchups are good, is what I wrote down. Raiders, Redskins, Buffalo Bills. But good luck on being able to guess like your game flow, how the offense is going to function, how the defense is going to function. That's how I would look at these guys. So like probably downgrades everybody, but you've already been downgrading all these guys because of how inconsistent they've been down the line. That's what I would say. Running back usage remained consistent between Bigsby and Shipley. If you're wondering, let's see. Falcons blown out by Seattle, and we can kind of guess that one. So like I don't have a lot to say about them. Let's see. Someone did sign with them. If I could find them. Did not write it down. So right now, Drake London right there. He did not practice on Tuesday. They play Thursday night. I would expect that he's not going to play this week out there. So maybe you're going to get him week 16. You know, if you're wondering about all that stuff. Thursday night game. Let's see. And someone did sign with them. I don't know who it was. Did not write it down. Did see it. But I'll get back to that later. And then the other one would be Kyle Pitts right there. Knee, limited practice Tuesday. So like he would be the main guy that I would be rolling right there when it comes to the Falcons for the time being on that one. And then guessing your scripts overall. Tampa Bay, Arizona should be good scripts for your toys. The Rams may not be because like they may be just good at football. All right, Giants. Already talked about Jackson Dart, and he's going to be like very dependent upon whether or not they use him as goal line fullback. Again, theoretically, the Redskins game could be a good matchup. Week 16 is going to be all over the place because of Minnesota. That's why we keep talking about Minnesota. Week 17 would lean in the direction of rolling Jackson Dart, but hopefully you went out and got your Joe Burrows if you got released or something like that. No news on Tyrone Tracy right now. So if Devin Singletary is some way, shape, or form are going to be available, like this is a hard stash / block, depending on like if you need them, full bell cow coming out of the bye, and what would look like a good matchup in this one. And then the other one, if he somehow got dropped, would be Theo Johnson with those 8 targets coming out of the bye with the weeks that are coming up with him because he's a tight end. All right, Jaguars, and we do have a little bit of stuff to talk about with them. First, running back situation. So Tootin, I guess he got knocked out with a concussion, but they evaluated him and he came back in. But the other thing is 3% snaps, 2 fumbles, 1 loss. That's statistically. So like I would say like maybe dicier to be the handcuff. That's a pretty brutal stat line down the line going into the playoffs. Now, if ETN gets knocked out, like he probably comes out of the doghouse, but this may definitely affect whether or not he is going to be desperation RB2 or anything like that. Out of there. So ETN in this one, 72% snaps, and this is why like when I was breaking all this stuff, all the red zone went to him. So whatever, it could have been the concussion, it could have been the fumbles. That's what cost Tootin on all that stuff. Wide receiver usage, and I'll just go to Jacoby Myers right here. Start this off. 10 targets, 4 for 36, and a touchdown. So sometimes I don't need to know how the sausage is made. And then Brian Thomas is back. 83% snaps, 6 for 3 for 87. and then you're trying to track a matchup, and that really downgrades week 17 if you're, if he's already been disappointing, you're wondering when to roll him out there. Parker Washington was out with a hip. Tim Patrick, and fantasy is fantasy. 66% snaps, 6 for 5 for 78 and touchdown right there. Like who would have guessed that one? That's one of the ones where I'm just not sarcastic. Yeah, who knows? Bretton Strange, and again, you're kind of tracking on some stuff with him. 80% snaps, 6 for 3 for 27 in that one. So like the predictive week of Bretton Strange went to Tim Patrick. All right, Jets. So I probably would be staying away from your Jets because like really early on in the game, right here, Tyrod Taylor gets knocked out with a groin, and you can see like he's at 10% snaps in the game. So supposedly Justin Fields was dealing with a magical knee injury, and that's why he was inactive. And then you went and you got like undrafted free agent Brady Cook, who comes in and is not good. 14 for 30, 2 interceptions. Let's see, 2 fumbles, not lost, 6 sacks. Yeah. So you're rolling the Jets right now, unless you get news on your Justin Fields or your Tyrod Taylor. I don't see it being Tyrod Taylor. So like if they try and roll Brady Cook, looking for news. They have no incentive to do anything but tank the rest of the way. If you're wondering about all that stuff. So I don't care about Brees. I didn't see any difference in Brees overall, 76% snaps in the game. No news on Garrett Wilson. And again, I would be leaning towards him being shut down. And then we got to go to the 2 other guys. Eagles, Mechie was at like 97% snaps in the game. And Adonai Mitchell was at like 91% snaps in the game. And I was expecting this to be a shootout, but like, you have to be able to guess that Tyrod Taylor got knocked out early in the game. There you go sometimes when it comes down to that. So I probably would not be rolling any of the Jets if it's Brady Cook. And maybe if it's Justin Fields, that would maybe upgrade Breece Hall. I don't know if I would be rolling necessarily the pass catchers at that point overall with all the problems that are going on. Don't care about Mason Taylor at this point. All right, Lions. Right here. So the Sun God, he is a surprise play. He actually played on Thursday night, and he had a relatively good game. 9 for 6 for 92 in the game. Tight ends, we got to go over to them first. So they did waive Ross Dwelley after the game. So I would imagine you're looking at like Anthony Frisker being the starting tight end for the time being, 56% snaps. And I bring this up because our boy Isaac Tesla, with the tight end situation, he's at 77% snaps. From a fantasy perspective, not a real life football perspective, Isaac Tesla is probably going to be operating as the tight end for the Lions down the line. That's what the snap share would say. So they're probably going to be living in 3 wide receiver sets on that one. And then like there's JMO, 9 for 7 for 96. Like I imagine the Rams game might turn into a little bit of shootout. And then the next 2 games are not going to be one of the ones that I would be chasing some of the stuff on. And then you get your victory lap with Jahmyr Gibbs, 3 rushing touchdowns. And then 7 for 7 for 77 in the passing game. All right. Packers. So first and foremost, Josh Jacobs, 72% snaps. So the knee is trending in the right direction. I do believe that Emmanuel Wilson did have a red zone opportunity regardless. Let's see, scrolling down here. Matthew Golden was at 9% snaps in the game. Let's see, Dontavian Wicks got knocked out with an ankle on his 11% snaps. Melton, Bo Melton's a good football player. He was at 17% snaps in the game. He also plays cornerback. He does tug on his 17% snaps. 1 for 45 for a touchdown on 2 targets. In this one, Savion Williams was out with a foot. They did. Oh, there we go. I could explain this now. There, it's right there. So Malik Heath, he gets waived by the Packers. He gets signed by the Falcons. I imagine this is leaning towards Drake London may be missing even week 16. Because I could see that he's going to slot in right into that Drake London lull at this point, if that's what they need, because they were rolling David Stills there, and I don't think David Stills is necessarily going to be the guy. Like Malik Heath may be better at football. There you go. And then now we can talk about like where's he at? Jaden Reed, he's back, 47% snaps, 4 for 4 for 31. I don't imagine the snap share is going to go up too significantly higher with him down the line. Romeo Doubs remains consistent, 81% snaps, 2 targets. No whatever. Like this is going to be predictive that these guys are going to be all over the place. So the only guy I would probably, we already talked about this before, that I would be really going after would be your Christian Watsons Up to 83% snaps, 4 for 4 for 89, 2 touchdowns. That's still going to be volatile. And you're looking at like week 16, week 17, probably would be benching in week 15 if he's not one of those like guys that you have to be rolling in like your wide receiver 2, like one of those spots that you don't have guys to replace him with down the line. All right. Don't care about the Packers tight ends. All right. Panthers were on bye. And because we're in playoff mode, I will say that between Rico Dowdle and Chuba Hubbard, I would probably be leaning Chuba Hubbard coming out of the bye, but I am expecting a split backfield. Oh, that's when you see like Chuba's at 59% snaps. I believe the overall usage was 19 to 20 between the two guys in this one. But Chuba Hubbard was the guy that was used more in the receiving game and the receiving situation and the red zone. So I would probably be leaning towards him, and then the snap share would lean in that direction also. But I imagine it's going to be a split backfield between those two guys. I could also see the other thing is we might get some type of, quote unquote, post bye rookie bump when it comes to Tet. And then Coker would be another guy that would be looking at. The Saints and the Bucks are going to be games that like maybe we could lean towards the Panthers being in the right script if we get lucky, and then week 17 we're benching everybody because that's the Seahawks. All right. Patriots, they're coming out of their bye, and this is like after waiver stuff, but I would lean towards Travion Henderson slightly because I think he has the higher upside. If Ramondre is available, you're probably gonna he's gonna be that like a low end RB2 type range if he's there. That's how I would view these two guys. The other thing with the wide receiver usage coming out of the bye, I imagine is going to stay relatively consistent. Even with Stephon Diggs at snap share, like only peaked at 63% snaps in week 4. Overall usage for the wide receivers has remained consistent on the year. I don't think that's necessarily going to change coming out of the bye week. That's how I would view all that stuff. So if you're wondering, all right, Raiders, they're bad. So Genti, primarily 70% snaps, like, or if you're wondering about that. So there's not a lot to talk about them. From a fantasy perspective, or dynasty perspective, I should say, Thornton was out with a concussion. You also got Michael Mayer being out with an ankle right there. And then we can talk about, like, again, the dynasty stuff. So there's Jack Beck. I like him as a prospect. I think he's very similar to like Kobe Myers. 82% snaps, 6 for 6 for 50. Probably not going to be tracking him in anything other than like your deeper, darker leagues. But from a dynasty perspective, this is like trending in the right direction about what I think he'll be like that possession type receiver. When it comes for the Raiders, Tyler Lockett was at 60% snaps in the game, so you still did not get the uptick even with like Deontay Thornton being out. So it does look like you're going to get like Trey Tucker and Beck and then Bowers. And then Michael Mayer might end up being like the third guy if and when he comes back, but then we can talk about like next year or something like that. All right. Rams, they blew out the Cardinals in this one, and we'll just talk about wide receiver. This is kind of funny. 44% snaps, but 11 for 7 for 167, 2 touchdowns when it comes to Puka. Devontae Adams did have 2 more red zone opportunities in this game, did not tug. Colby Parkinson, 69% snaps, 5 for 3 for 32, and a touchdown, and that was on, let's see, I think he had 2 red zone opportunities in this one. No, I had 3. He had 3 more red zone opportunities on this one. He did tug on one of them. Now, this is one of those things when we talk about like regressing, quote unquote, to the mean. That's not how like it works in real life. Remember, math does not model reality. Reality models. Oh, wait, I said that backwards. Reality models math. Math does not model reality. So in this case, like we could say that the statistics are going to say he's going to regress back and not catch more touchdown passes. But if they're continuing to get to the red zone because they're good offense and they throw to him when he's in the red zone, yes, there's a possibility he won't touch a touchdown pass like in week 13. But if generally that's what the past is saying is going to be the future, you're going to have more opportunity for Colby Parkinson to touch touchdowns. Now, again, we already know what the pecking order is going to be for the Rams, and he's probably like 5th when it comes to the pecking order. So take that in mind. But like I could see, yes, he's going to continue to touch touchdown passes. There's nothing to say that like that's some type of statistical aberration is going to regress to anything. If that makes any sense to anybody listening to me mumble all over the place. All right. Kyron Williams, remember this was kind of a blowout. 51% snaps in the game. 31% snaps went to Blake Corum. In this game, again, this is kind of a blowout. 3 red zone opportunity went to him. 2 went to Kyron Williams. Blake Corum was the first guy to score in the first quarter. That's how the usage rolled out. So when we talk about like, we already knew that there was a possibility of you getting some type of desperation RB2. He did that in week 13. The snap share did not change. the game flow did, which we could predict that like the Rams are a good football team. Yes, some of this is going to remain consistent. Talk about like how the math functions. He could go back to having week 12 Tampa Bay 7 for 24 on 34% snaps. Week 15 in what predicts to be a shootout. But if he gets the red zone opportunity and falls in the end zone, you get your 40-degree day. There you go on how that. So like should be rostered in all leagues. You can roll him in your deeper leagues. Probably not going to give you the upside, but like that's how you would lose out on your bye week by not rolling the safe play sometimes when it comes to me. All right. Let's see, he's rolling down here. And then we'll talk about, like, I did see this with the Rams. So in this blowout, you get Terrence Ferguson all the way up to 64% snaps. That would be a little bit more interesting, maybe like week 15. Probably not going to be rolled by anybody because we're not going to have enough data to support that. Again, this is in a blowout. Rams do tend to use a lot of tight ends this year. Maybe we could talk about like a little bit of a shootout with the Lions in week 15. And then if he's the number 3 in the passing game, maybe we could talk about that. I probably would still, I would still lean towards Parkinson and his ability to catch a touchdown pass in a game with a lot of scoring than trying to get like your monster spike with a Terrence Ferguson week with all your if, buts, and maybes. All right, Ravens. So the big one in this one would be your running back usage right here. Keaton Mitchell gets knocked out with a knee. Says MRI comes back clean, whatever that means. So 15% snaps, 6 for 76 in the game. But I imagine like if he gets knocked out of the game and that he goes and gets an MRI, that he may be missing time. And again, roster cuffs, it does look like it's Rasheen Ali, even though he was only at 34% snaps, 1 for 2 in the rushing game and another 3 for 2 for 11 at this rate. Tight ends, and I do have this pulled up right here with Isaiah Likely in the game. 60% snaps, 6 for 4 for 25, and a touchdown. Week 15 would project it as a shootout. Week 16 would lean towards that in that direction, but definitely week 15, not going to be surprised if he finishes like top 10 tight end if you want to get spicy in your type deeper leagues. We talk about like Gesicki being predictive. We can talk about like Likely being predictive on top of that. All right, Saints. And I already talked a little bit about Tyler Show. And I'm a little surprised about how well he has played, considering how bad the reports were about him coming into the season. Now, definitely, he is deceptively athletic, but he is not a goal line fullback. I'll just talk about like 7 for 55, 2 rushing touchdowns in the passing or rushing game. I don't think any of that's going to be predictive. I don't think it's going to be like, something that I would expect to happen in the future. That's just how it goes. But these matchups with the Panthers, the Jets, and the Titans, definitely in your 2 quarterback leagues, like I could see getting cute. I don't know how much you're going to get like consistent rushing touchdowns out of him. And then the other thing is, again, talking about like Shakur, how much you're going to get higher volume passing and how much he's going to be the guy that's going to be throwing the touchdown passes. That's how you get your spike weeks on that one. So there you go. Running back usage, no news on Kamara right now that I saw. You're looking at Devin Neal, 71% stuff, 19 for 60, and a touchdown. That was really early in the game. It was like 1 yard rushing touchdown that he got. Another 1 for 1 for 14. So you got your week. You got your weeks, I would say, out of him, considering the injury to Kamara. Now maybe depending on like you're rolling him, outside of like desperation land. If you have to be rolling him until Kamara comes back. The other thing that I would talk about with him is Audric Estime on 17% snaps. He did get a red zone opportunity in this game. So that's something to be paying attention to. Evan Hull, he goes down to 12% snaps. You see 2 total opportunities. It is Neal's backfield until Kamara comes back. And then you do get right here matchups that I would generally say, yeah, you're going to be rolling Devin Neal as long as he's the starting running back. All right. And then the other thing with the wide receivers, if you're wondering about like Vele, he remains consistent at 93% snaps if you went and you picked him up. No red zone opportunities went to any of the wide receivers or tight ends in this game, but overall usage remained consistent with him. And then you're tracking like certain weeks, like these are weeks that we could talk about like being ugly enough that you might get some type of usage. I probably not be chasing that, but you do you on that one. The other thing is I did write down Taysom Hill. 41% snaps. He had 4 total opportunities, but generally he has not been fantasy relevant. And I didn't see any red zone opportunities when it comes down. If you're worried about your Neal shares, all right. Seahawks, they're going to be up next. They blew out who they blow out? They blew out the Falcons in this one. So you got 3 touchdown passes for Darnold. Running back usage, they don't care. 52% snaps for Kenneth Walker. 3 red zone opportunities or 3 red zone carries went to him. 1 red zone target went to him. Charbonnet, he's at 41% snaps. 1 red zone opportunity to go to him. That red zone opportunity flopped. That means that it's not predictive. They know how they're using those guys. We don't. In this one, Shaheed right here, he has his best week when it comes to the Saints. In this one, snap share remains consistent, 51% snaps. 5 for 4 for 67. Also had a return touchdown. So like deep enough, dark enough leagues. Week 15, probably not. Week 16, maybe you would think about that. Week 17, maybe, but probably would not be getting that cute. Steelers, they were able to beat the Ravens in this one right here. Did not see anything necessarily different with running back usage when it comes to the Steelers this week. You see 50% snaps for Jalen Warren and 48% snaps for Kenneth Gainwell. If you're wondering about all that stuff, and I did not write that down, if you're also wondering about that stuff, did get a DK Metcalf sighting in this one. Right there, 83% snaps, 12 for 7 for 148. Didn't see this until today. I guess he went to the hospital with some type of like stomach pains that were going on, so that's something to be monitoring. You get Roman Wilson being a healthy scratch for the Steelers. And we got to go to the Vikings and talk about like your Adam Thielen share. So first game in, 48% snaps, 1 for 1 for 4. And then we're talking about like, can we get weeks where we talk about like, if you're chasing your Adam Thielen shares, because he does look like they're going to be leaning towards him being the wide receiver 2 in the offense. Week 15, week 16, yeah, you could get thinking about like doing that. I probably would not. And again, like trying to chase other stuff when it comes to the Steelers. Maybe you're going to get a week where Darnell Washington gets knocked out with a concussion. I would be leaning towards Muth at this point. Week 15, week 16, if it's a little bit longer. But you do you when it comes down to that. I don't think you can predict any of this stuff. If you're wondering about that, Texans, as I sit up in my chair. So Nick Chubb gets knocked out with a rib. You get the equal and opposite reaction where you get like full bell cow Woody Marks up to 87% snaps. I might imagine that if Chubb misses any time, somebody else is going to step into that role, because I don't know if they're going to go like full bell cow with Woody Marks down the line. Would lean towards maybe like you're going to get like more British Brooks usage in the offense, maybe. But it probably doesn't matter just how they're generally designed, with Woody Marks. So you're kind of hoping that you get like Nick Chubb knocked out and then you get like full bell cow. But I don't think you're going to get like that type of usage when it comes to the Texans. And remember, their defense is so good that they're probably not going to have to play those style of games coming down the line. Wide receiver usage, the only one that I saw that kind of stood out to me, I rolled down here, Xavier Hutchinson was down to 40% snaps in the game. I don't know where those snaps went, because they didn't go to Jaden Higgins. He stayed consistent at 60% snaps, if you want to be looking at all that stuff right here. And I didn't see the tight end usage did not necessarily change in any necessarily interesting directions. And then Tony Pollard, we'll talk about him when it comes to the Texans right there. Like guy in my main money league made playoffs because this was his RB2 all year long. Couldn't find another RB2. He rolled him. He got the spike. 25 for 161, 2 touchdowns in this one. And he's like ripped off like 250 yarders or something like that in this one. And then you're looking at, didn't see anything when it comes to the wide receivers with like A.O. Minor and DK or whatever. Didn't see anything that's really interesting to me. Gunnar Helm was not necessarily relevant in the passing game, as I erase all that stuff because it's not relevant. So hopefully you're not going to be chasing those guys if you're going to be trying to win your fantasy championship. Lots of Viking stuff to actually talk about. This is kind of funny. So with JJ McCarthy coming in, he throws 3 touchdown passes. Not predictive. I actually rolled the Redskins against the Vikings. I got burned. That's why I don't get my bye week. Week 15, you want to get fun. You could talk about like rolling all your Viking shares going up against the Cowboys in week 15 when it comes to JJ McCarthy. So now we're talking about like JJ McCarthy being predictive as having like a top 10 quarterback finish with week 15. Probably only 2 quarterback leagues I would be getting that crazy with him. But this probably would upgrade Justin Jefferson from a guy that like I would think about benching to a guy that I'm absolutely rolling in week 15. It also would move Jordan Addison up into a guy that I would think about rolling. And then also TJ Hawkinson would be a guy that I would be rolling in week 15, trying to catch this some type of spike week or a shootout with the Cowboys at this point. And then after that, I probably would not be guessing anymore with the Vikings. Like that means like you're probably, if you made it in your playoffs and you have Justin Jefferson, you're probably benching him after week 15. That's out there. Running back usage did have a little bit of a flop based off what we saw. 45% snaps for Aaron Jones, 14 for 76, one target in this one. And I bring this up, and again, this was kind of a blowout with Jordan Mason. He was at 30% snaps. He does tug on his 11 for 52. 5 red zone went to Jordan Mason. 1 went to Jones in the game. So, like, if you're chasing these two guys that are going to be out there, already talked about the pass catchers. And then, yeah, if you're wondering about your Josh Oliver, one of the better blocking tight ends in the league. And then he just happens to get 2 red zone targets and he converts them. So there you go. So anyway, that's what I got for week 15 fantasy football. And hopefully I will see you guys next week.